Johan here with another video on gut mobilization, this time doing hip mobility that is belly enhanced. So as we've done in the past, I'm going to dive right into the technique, then we're going to spend some time afterwards to talk about why this is important and how it works. So what we're doing basically is taking classic important runner hip mobility exercises and adding a belly enhanced mobility strategy. Basically just pulling and stretching the belly away from the hip. What we're going to start with is runner's lunge. And runner's lunge is just that foundational stretch where you have one leg up in that flexed running position, one leg back into an extended position. Only this time we're going to, rather than just hang out here, we're going to pull on the belly. So to do that, and first work on hip extension, I'm going to actually get on my skin. It's going to be a little bit easier to grip. Putting my left leg up, I'm stretching my right into extension, and my left arm is going to be grabbing, my left arm and hand is grabbing the right side of my belly. Then I'm going to assist with my right hand. I'm going to show you guys with a pointed finger that I'm pushing to the left, away from this hip and pelvis. So I'm in this position. There's my belly enhanced stretch. And so I can hang out here, but I just always like movement. So I am lunging forward. I can do a side to side here. I can even do a little bit of rotation. But I'm just pulling aspects of my belly away from the pelvis, from the hip, from the psoas, because that's where the belly can stick to those key orthopedic structures. That's extension. If I want to work hip flexion too, same strategy, I'm just going to put my right hip up. Same thing, I am pushing away towards the left, away from the right, while I do a lunge-like movement. Side view, same thing. I'm lunging forward while I am stretching away. That's runner's lunge. You can also do this for side lunge. Side lunge is doing basically hip abduction. So in this position, if I want to try to free my belly, I can go both directions. Again, the belly gets stuck to the pelvis, femur, related structures. I want to just stretch that belly away, grabbing whatever feels tight. The other that we can do for IT band, very common IT band, is a issue with stiffness around the pelvis bone. So I'm going to get into an IT band stretch where I put my stretched leg behind me, and then I'm going to do a side bend. But guess what? I'm going to add the belly pull away. So those are the three strategies. Now I can be more specific with what my hands do. I was showing you just a lateral pull, but depending on the structure that's tight, we can try a couple different things. I can also do a 45-degree pull. In a 45-degree pull, depending on where my hand is, if I put my hand more medial, that's going to get my small intestine. So sometimes it's the small intestine that's a little bit tight, right over the top of the psoas that goes down into the hip. So if I wanted to do that, I can do a 45-degree angle pull, again, assisting with that opposite hand while I go into a movement. The other thing that I can do is just more of a superficial pull. And so if I'm going into my small intestine, I may just like push down a little bit, but there is an external layer of the belly called the peritoneum that can also get tight. So if I want to do that superficial layer, I can just kind of do a more general grab. I can even do two hands. So if I wanted to do a two-handed big grab, a superficial pull, again, I can do something like that. Super effective at just getting that top layer of fascia that goes down into the hip. The last thing that I can do structurally is the large intestine. So the large intestine starts here and then it runs around the boundary of our pelvis. If I want to get that big tube, I'm actually going to change my grip and I'm going to go wider. So the ascending colon runs through the right pelvis and then it goes up to the right rib cage. If I want to get that and peel that away from my pelvis, I'm going to just grip. I'm going to go farther lateral around the corner slightly. So now I've grabbed almost kind of behind the ribs, even almost into the back of the pelvis. That right there under my finger is still large intestine. So I'll still have my dummy hand. So I'm pushing this direction. Same thing, I could go into my runner's lunge, side lunge, or this is a really great one for the IT band. Stretching that ascending colon away from the pelvis. Those are the strategies. Here's why they're so important. Believe it or not, the gut can get sticky to the orthopedic components of the hip. Why or how does that happen? It happens primarily, the easiest explanation is we have to, when we go run, we can't just set our guts out on the porch and then go for a run. We have to take our guts with. And so the roles of the pelvis when we run are threefold. Number one, it connects this propulsive leg to our body. Number two, it has to move a lot and it has to be really stable when we land. But number three, it has to do those first two things while holding our guts. And sometimes for various reasons, the guts can get stuck to these moving parts. And so that's the idea. And it took me a decade of clinical practice working with runners and a decade plus of competitive running to realize, like, man, why when I do myofascial techniques or if I do a regular stretch, I don't seem to, there's certain instances when it just doesn't get better. Where I can stretch, or maybe it gets better for a few hours or for half of a day, but then I'm right back to having a stubborn restriction. And what I found was a lot of those restrictions live in this visceral or gut fascial tension around the pelvis and structures of the hip. So simply put, just being a runner and that 3 times a second jostling of your gut into the pelvis is enough to get it a little bit sticky. Add to that some inflammation, which can happen just from maybe not eating very good race foods, a lot of sugar. That too can make that sort of chemically sticky in here. But there are other big things that can make a gut really sticky if we have any trauma here. The biggest one is surgery. If you have any surgery, could be a C-section, could be an appendectomy, opening that up and having an inflammatory event, these tubes and these structures lose their kind of natural lubrication and they can just stick to stuff. Any blunt force trauma, so if I'm running and I fall and I bang my pelvis, that can kind of rattle the insides. It can even kind of bruise the organs a little bit and then they get stuck. So these are the sorts of things that can happen. It's just super common. And so the easiest thing that we can do as runners to enhance our full mobility and sustained mobility is to think, okay, what else needs to move here? And so if you are struggling with hip mobility problems or low back mobility or low back pain, I suggest that you try self-assess and just feel like how much tighter is the front of your hip when you add a belly pull. But additionally, a lot of knee problems, foot problems, downstream issues can come from hip and pelvic restrictions that are really being held by the gut. So give these a try. You can also go back to my first article on gut mobility called You Gotta Have Guts, where we talk more in depth. There's some videos there that shows the anatomy. But yeah, think about everything that can possibly restrict your mobility, and let's not forget our belly when we go out for a run.